Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm really excited because today I'm joined by Pianist extraordinaire and a YouTuber. Ben, thank you very much for giving us this brief moment to be able to do this interview.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Alex.
What does your daily practice routine usually look like?
I don't currently have a routine, not in the sense that I wake up with practice goals because of some looming concert or audition or whatever it might be. Practice just sort of happens. I'm doing it constantly, but it's not because I've set out some kind of routine or regimen in my mind. Usually, I have other projects related to making content or right now I'm teaching at a university. So those are sort of on my mind as a first priority. And then, when I need to take a break from that, especially taking a break from mental labor or the kinds of creative work that I do, the piano is always right there, and I always have something I'm working on. So right now it's Beethoven Opus 109, bringing this back. And yeah, I end up practicing every day for quite a while, but strangely, it's actually a break. It's a relief from
Yeah.
other priorities I have. So
Okay. With the part of playing, what kind of music do you most enjoy playing?
I guess I'm pretty conservative. I like uh, as much Chopin as I've made videos about. I don't think I'm that natural of a Chopin player, and I don't so easily play Chopin. I have to work on it a lot. So I actually think playing music of Beethoven or Bach, um, the Germans, tends to fit my hand and my temperament a little better, and I enjoy exploring the details of that music. So
Yeah, there's always like a little hint or hidden part in Mozart's music, which makes it Mozart so beautiful.
always, yeah.
What type of music do you enjoy not playing but listening to?
Well, sadly, I don't have an answer for that anymore because I almost never listen to music for pleasure. That might sound crazy, but I'm just always absorbed in music, and I'm always creating and working on projects that are centered on and focused on music. So when I then listen to something or consume something that's during my leisure time, it's usually a podcast or something inane like sports talk. But people talking is usually what I want to, I want to hear people discuss ideas or current events or whatever it might be. So I feel like, and I don't want this to stay this way. It's just been this way and recently in my life. But I do look forward to getting back to a time when I have and I look forward to listening again. There's so much music I've never heard before. So my really heaviest listening days are currently behind me, but I also hope that they're going to return soon.
Okay, we're gonna go interesting one, I think, for most of the viewers who are gonna have, is which piece is the most challenging or has been the most challenging for you to practice and learn?
Let me answer that by thinking of a piece that I actually did learn and perform, and not one that I just tried to play or practiced or, which may forever be beyond me. But I did somehow learn the Goldberg variations, even though the first time I looked at them, I thought they were impossible. Not the way, a piece of Liszt or Rachmaninoff or Alcon or Prokofiev might seem technically and physically demanding, but on another level of just this having to do a bunch of different things simultaneously, having to control two or three different lines of a canonic voice at the same time in the same hand. This just seemed, when I first looked at the score seriously, maybe 15 years ago, I'd only ever heard it. And, I enjoyed listening to it, I guess, but I didn't grow my appreciation for it until I looked at the score and realized what was going on and how challenging that was to assemble in the hands. And so my first couple times sight reading it, I just thought this must be a piece for somebody else, not for me, even though I wish I could play it. But actually, it was training my hands to do those things, to do two things at once. It's harder even than a fugue in some ways, just some of the running lines. And there's a lot of virtuosity, almost Scarlatti, like finger dazzling finger technique in the Goldberg variation. So having to go back and forth between that and then these tight contrapuntal sort of variations like the canons, I just found that really intimidating. And then I ended up doing it, and I found a way to calm my body down and develop a kind of finger independence that actually ended up helping me in a lot of other romantic music. It made everything easier because everything is polyphonic on the piano. Even romantic music, there's always layers of different things going on, and it helped me start to control those. So, yeah, maybe I'll never be able to play some of the bigger virtuosic pieces, or I'll never dedicate myself to trying to do that. I'll never do all 24 Chopin etudes at a performance level, this kind of thing. And anytime I've tried to do that, I've just given up because I have better things to do with my life, and other people do it better anyway. So, but yeah, I actually did sort of not master, but I did complete and perform the Goldberg variations on a number of occasions.
When you've gone to seen or played any performance, was there any moment which really stuck to you? For example, in the Chopin piano competition, which you recently have been in.
Specific moment, the competitions I've been to recently, my head is so like in the way of just purely listening and feeling that it's hard to say there was any one moment that was that really struck me or took hold of me. Um, but at least, of course, I heard some incredible performances, but I was also sort of my analytic mind was at work, and you can't really listen aesthetically in the same way if you're thinking about what's going on and you're being critical of it. So yeah, it was. I do think sometimes I would kind of stop thinking and caring. And there were some wonderful performances I heard of Jack Gower, David Krakuli, Piotr Pavlak, people like that. And in the Clyburn, Magdalene Ho, I thought was, probably made me stop thinking, and I just sort of absorbed what she was doing. So yeah, I mean, I this might be a depressing interview. I have to confess, I don't like going to concerts that much. I'm much more into recordings, and listening. Or it back when I listened to music, my highest moments of pleasure with music were me and probably my headphones on or listening to music in a car. I always like driving while listening to music, so long as the music didn't get too soft. But yeah, I'm sort of a Glenn Gould. I'm on Glenn Gould's side of this. Just our temperaments are similar in that I find the concert hall to be one in which I'm completely distracted by everybody around me, and it's really hard to just absorb myself in the music. If anything, sitting through these competitions, it helped me have to focus in because I knew I needed to sort of produce reviews, and it allowed me to focus. And so I was able to tune out a lot of the ambient
Yeah.
distractions around me. So,
Happens to
yeah,
me.
I mean, my ideal concert experience would be one where I'm more like what Gould said. He wished it was more like a movie theater, like completely dark, so you don't really feel the presence of the people around you, and you just saw sort of light on the stage with as much quietude surrounding me as possible. This happens occasionally, so yeah, but of course I can't make those demands. I can't go to the concert hall and be like, "Can you turn off the lights?" Just put a spotlight on the performer and make sure everyone shuts up around me. So, yeah, I this is all by way of saying I haven't had my most transcendent experiences with music in a concert hall.
Yeah, as you said, with the light and silence, for example, in the Chopin piano competition, when a performer finished, there was like a bunch of a wave of people coughing like every
There's
single
the
time.
coughing, but that was a beautiful hall, and so I just loved sitting. I've never been in such a gorgeous, classy kind of place. And the people are very well behaved around you during the performance, but you're still in a crowd. I just for me
Yeah,
that's not conducive to the kind of immediacy and presence that I want to experience when I'm listening.
The
And
beauty
so, I
would,
mean, there's 22 microphones and cameras being sort of guided here and there, throughout the hall. So you kind of feel that you're in a spectacle, and that for me distracts from becoming absorbed in the work of art.
yeah. So what I'm hearing, for example, your perfect ideal moment would be, for example, if you were in the bliss of space and listening to Chopin's sonatas by, for example, Glenn Gould or someone. And that would be like a
Perhaps,
bliss.
although that sounds also very cold and lonely. If I'm just
Yeah.
floating through outer space, maybe I can bring my wife with me and we can just listen together or something without talking until the piece is over. I don't know. It's not, I don't think it's a I'm not promoting this. I actually think group listening in groups, I'm wondering what the experience of the people around me is like, and that makes me kind of not be able to have my own genuine experience. So I don't know. Music is hard. It doesn't really belong to this world. It's not really of this world, is it? It's we live in a world so dominated by visual spectacle, and music, especially concentrated listening, is one that has never quite fit. For me, music has always been a higher ideal than it has been a lived reality. It's probably I make probably make my videos about something that has never fully existed for me. I'm sort of trying to imagine the perfection of these pieces and describe it, but in a sort of platonic way, the same way there's no perfect triangle or whatever, right? In the world, they're always slightly one molecule off. I guess I'm living in that. I'm always trying to aspire to that sort of pure ideal of music, and I've never quite fully experienced it. But maybe that's also what drives me to always come back to it. Makes me so attracted to it.
Advice would you give to a young kid or pianist who's trying to go to the same career which you've done, like be a YouTuber and a musician?
Well, if you want to go do YouTube, ideally you already have experience, or at least you enjoy creating videos, or you're really excited about getting to learn how to do that technically, because it's an extremely tedious process and a very tedious life to edit content all the time. You have to really enjoy that, and I do enjoy it. I get in, probably I'm most in the flow state, not listening to music or even practicing the piano, although sometimes I'll lose myself. But it's when I'm editing, it's when I'm kind of designing and creating this thing, this composition, which is only mine. And I know I have a vision for what it should be, and how that maps onto each moment and ultimately each frame, that I'm able to have this full control over. And I can always, whatever it is on a Mac, Command Z, I can always undo. And so this power of undoing and then redoing and then continuing to mold and create something is, I just, for me, it fits my personality, and it's something I'm really drawn to. And I think you have to be that if you want to make YouTube videos, at least of a detailed nature, but you have to have some kind of editor's mentality. I always I'm a slow reader, but I think I'm a good writer because I write as if I'm editing somebody else's writing. If that makes
Oh,
any sense. So I feel like when I'm creating video, I edit as if I'm editing a video that already exists, but I'm just turning it into my ideal and not even thinking of it as my own. I create by imagining that it's something that I'm watching, that is exactly what I would want to see, or reading that is exactly what I would want to read. And it's funny, we don't get to do that as classical pianists. We have to accept what the composer has written. I'm not sitting there recomposing the notes. Some people do, they'll make arrangements, but I never had that composer's mentality with music. I'm not a composer, not since I was 10. Did I compose anything worthwhile? And so in any case, if you're going to go into this, first of all, for piano, you have to have some kind of either work ethic or somebody who's making you do it for a while until you get good. So if that's you, I highly recommend it. You can derive a lot of pleasure from it.
is there a project or musical idea you especially feel excited about right now?
Yeah, well, I just got done with a big one. The Chopin podcast ran my life for a year and a half, and there's actually more Chopin stuff that I'm committed to even this year, although I'm getting away from it. So I'm most excited about videos I'm making that aren't about Chopin, but about topics that kind of intersect. They're at the intersection point of, let's say, classical music and pop culture. Um, Not because I'm interested in pop culture per se, but there are some good representations of classical music in the mainstream. For example, the film Amadeus.
Yeah.
I've had a idea for a video for years now that I keep. I wrote a script to it 2 years ago, and I just haven't had the time to produce it. And it's about that famous scene where Mozart humiliates Salieri by taking the march that Salieri wrote for him, and just kind of saying, "I don't need your score. I already memorized it from listening to you play it, and also it's not a very good piece. I'm going to make it better right here on the spot and improvise a." And my thought was, everyone is fascinated by this scene because they think it's such a perfect representation of Mozart's genius, and also it shows incredibly the fictional Salieri's humiliation and envy. Of course, this never happened. Salieri was never such a low composer as this. He was much better than the composer in the movie, and he did not kill Mozart. But in any case, in the scene, what I always found interesting, or as I got to know Mozart's music and his musicianship better, I realized that what he does in that movie is would have been child's play, literally in the 18th century. Not for everyone, but at least the ability to improvise on very standard, basically chord progressions and bass lines was literally being taught to Italian orphan boys. Maybe they didn't all have perfect pitch, so he was able to immediately know that the piece was in C major and that he can improvise on it. But it couldn't have been a more simple kind of harmonic scheme. And but in because we live in a world now with such low standard of music education, people see it and they're like, "Oh my gosh, she's able to improvise this thing on the spot. No other human being could do that." So what I want to show in the movie is, first of all, what basic knowledge uh, Mozart had. Like, what is the implicit knowledge he has to be able to hear something like that, and then just know what schemes, what sort of fluent, tonal musical language is in his head, so that he can hear it and immediately be able to recite it back to you. But also, what was the height of his genius at the time? And there's a great story from when he was like 13 or 14, and he went to a concert in the Sistine Chapel, and he heard like a complex multi-part choral piece that later he ended up just transcribing by ear, which was dangerous because this was not written down or disseminated in public, and his father was worried they would be excommunicated. This is a much more higher act of incredible transcendent musicianship than anything that's shown in this scene. This is all by way of saying, as you can tell, I really want to share this story, this new way of looking at this otherwise extremely famous scene in film, in part because so many people love and adore this movie for good reason, who are not in the classical music world or concerned with kind of the competitions and things that you and I might be following, or the pianists or whatever that we like. But the movie is so famous, rightfully, that for me, that's a perfect opportunity to kind of reach an even broader audience with content that's not dumbed down for them, but actually makes them want to sort of rise up and sort of understand how a musician might look at this kind of scene. So that's what I'm doing right now, and it's been on the top of my mind, and hopefully it'll come out in a couple weeks. But every month I want to release another big standalone video that's not related to my Chopin podcast. And so my projects right now are more siloed. Once a month, something that I feel like will have a big impact, that I'm passionate about, that I want to work on. And at some point, maybe I'll do another long podcast, like a Beethoven podcast or something like that. But I have too many projects that I'll never get to, and it's actually kind of sore point for me. So
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next question. In your opinion, what is one of the most important qualities that a musician should have?
that's a good question, and it depends on what kind of musician that you want to be. It's easy to say you should have a good ear, but I didn't have a good ear initially when I started getting into music. Not at least not neither perfect pitch nor even the best sort of relative pitch. I listened to sort of aggregates of sound and color and emotion, and I felt music very deeply as a listener. And when I learned the piano and I practiced piano, for me, was probably most I responded most to the patterns, both visually, and I got pretty good at sight reading, and also in a tactile way on the keyboard itself, geometrically maybe, and the ear came later, and I developed it a lot, and it ended up being something that I taught, and I've taught ear training before, in part because I had to learn it. So I won't say you have to have a good ear if you want to be a good musician, but you have to develop your ear if you want to be a good musician. Nor do you have to necessarily have visual capacities like I think I had, or these kind of mathematical brain that I think I was more inherent to me, but you might need to develop it. It's really good to be able to have abstract formal understanding of especially more complicated compositions. I think most of all, you have to have a love and a desire to listen to and want to play and be able to bring to life music. And then these other kinds of skills or qualities, which different people have in different amounts, you can work on them, you can get better at them. But most of all, it's just that intangible drive and feeling of being drawn to music. It has to be something because it's a ridiculous thing to build a career in unless you're absolutely in love with it. So you do have to have this kind of obsession, I think, with music. It's not a field you go into casually, right? So that's the most important thing, is that kind of obsessive desire for music.
Do you think music, especially classical music, because it's your main topic in your videos, is accessible to everyone, or we could make it more accessible to more people?
I used to think about this more probably when I was your age, because there are sort of cliches about how music is the universal language. But then you have to ask, well, which music is that? Because I don't know which is the music that everybody likes. There isn't one. And yet there is a tradition within Western art music of conceiving of works of music as universal and promoting them as representations of some kind of universal humanity. Beethoven's symphonies being the most famous example of that. And this got Western art music in trouble over the last 30, 40 years, at least in Western academia. Scholars started getting very self-conscious about the fact that they were only ever writing about and studying works of European white men and all of this. And actually, it's not universal. It was very specific and socially and culturally to a certain moment in time. And these ideals of universality coming out of Germany were actually contingent and socially specific. So that was a big trend in musicology for a long time. And I'm over that. I actually really think it's important that we think of the universal potential and power and possibility of music. Are we going to be able to play a Beethoven Fifth Symphony for an uncontacted tribe, on an island in the Indian Ocean or in the Amazon? I don't know. I don't even know if it's ethical to try such an experiment, right? So I'm not claiming something empirically like Beethoven's music is something that every human being from whatever walk of life and whatever cultural background must be able to feel that they can connect with. But I do think that it is music that, when it is studied, and the kinds of ways, the best ways in which we study and listen and share it with each other, is not far off from the best things human beings, I think, have created and done. And in that way, I think it is something that, especially in a world that's so filled with ugliness and yeah, a sort of loss of humanity, a demotion of our human capacities. I think studying music, learning the piano, singing in choirs is underrated, and celebrating great works of music and musicianship in general is probably some of the best things that humanity has to show for itself. So, coming back to your question, I think this this musical tradition is one I think that is something that is for everybody, and we have to do work to make it more accessible. And we shouldn't be ashamed that it happens to come from Europe or whatever. I'm From what I can tell, people in Beijing or Seoul are pretty into this music too. So I don't think that it's like a culturally or historically specific thing. It's something that really does seem to resonate with people from all over the world all the time, but it takes resistance against a kind of dominant culture that we live in and in its technologies to try to promote this relatively archaic art form, which requires old fashioned instruments and long concentrated spans of listening and things like that. So, yeah, I think all of this music that I discuss on my channel is ultimately something that anyone and everyone can be, and I would argue on some level should be exposed to and have the opportunity to study and benefit from.
Okay, perfect. Do you think that the role of a musician, like a pianist, will be ever replaced in the future?
Well, it already has been a lot, right? I mean, even far before AI. Remember 100 years ago when recording and playback technologies were new. This was a great threat and danger, and perceived as something potentially very culturally damaging and insidious to live music, to music making as everybody knew it. And I mean, haven't radios and the PA systems and speakers in our public spaces and headphones and infinite recordings that we now have access to, hasn't that replaced musicians already? I mean, I don't need to get a musician to come and play for me if I want to hear a piece. I don't have to attend a concert. So, on the other hand, I wouldn't be a pianist if it weren't for recordings. They replaced musicians on some level. They also made a bunch more of them. They inspired a lot of other people to want to do it. So now AI is interesting, I guess, and we'll see where that goes. But uh, one thing I've noticed is there's been such a negative reaction to the AI slop, just the inundation of the internet with just fake images. Now, right now, we can sort of tell that they're AI generated, and I'm assuming pretty soon we won't be able to tell. And I guess maybe that's scary or not, but everyone seems very on edge about it, and you know, for understandably, but also what I've noticed is it's brought into relief things that are human made, that are very clearly, authentically a human being expressing themselves, and we haven't seen imitations that have or AI generated or simulated kinds of experiences or art or music that rises to the level of compositions that we know of. And what would it even how would we even be able to evaluate them if they do somehow get better? What does that even mean? So I think we're going to keep up with these complex ethical and aesthetic and moral questions when it comes to how machines may or may not replace human beings. But automation and the replacing of human labor with machine labor has been a phenomenon for 200 years, since the Industrial Revolution. And it's just found new and newer ways to, take our jobs. And sometimes that's a good thing. We don't want to do every job in society. So, but I do feel like the arts and the performing arts, especially, these are ones where we should be all moving towards doing these more often with each other because we don't have to do the jobs that robots can do. So there's also a tradition of thinking in a more utopian way, in which we imagine that automation can help us all do music more often with each other happily because we would have more spare time. because we don't have to do some of the more um, taxing and onerous jobs that the machines are able to do. We don't currently have a political or economic system that's able to achieve that. Instead, machines make people homeless. But yeah, it's something maybe we should work towards. And that ultimately, this traces back to the question before it. We all need to be trying to make more time for music and art, and we all need to be doing it together. And if machines start taking that away from us, uh, depending on how that looks, we might have reason to rebel against it.
Yeah, for example, right now, I believe that Same One Son is doing a stereo, which is the piano which plays itself by recordings of other pianists. And
Yeah,
that's,
but I'll tell you a story about that.
oh,
So somehow Steinway got the Spirio got rights to Glenn Gould's 1981 Goldberg Variations recording. There must be some, I don't know, contract with Sony which owns it or something like that. I don't know. First of all, Gould recorded that on a Yamaha. Well, okay, details, but it doesn't matter. It's interesting. Okay, so they have the exact data, MIDI data, and whatever complex Spirio data to be able to make the Spirio play the piano exactly how Gould did. So I heard this. I was in Cremona, Italy for a music exhibition there. And I was watching this. I was in a room, and it was a kind of a small room with carpet. And I was sitting there listening, and it just sounded horrible. I was like, not the Steinway. The instrument is great, whatever. But I wasn't listening to Gould play in this room. There was so much that was lost acoustically because Gould was playing a specific piano that he had worked on to achieve a specific sound in a specific space. And now we're on a completely different instrument, which is meant to play all kinds of different recordings from the past, but it's been flattened and homogenized by just by the conditions of that instrument in the room that it's in. And
yeah,
so everything kind of sounds the same in a way. And you lose precisely what made Gould's recording so special. And it's so that it's not just timing and dynamic inputs or whatever. And so what does that mean? Yeah, like we can't bring Gould back to life. Now, there are some interesting attempts to try to get this technology played on an instrument that was more like Gould's, and you put, but notice that like all of these efforts are just various ways of trying to relive and recapture something that we'll never be able to have again, which is this human being who was special, and only those in that moment who could hear it in that room will ever know what that was like. And for me, just the recording that they made, that Gould himself curated and made sure sounded exactly how he wanted it. Nothing will ever surpass that in terms of reliving that sort of Gould's ideal. And so I don't know if we're replacing other humans at all. If anything, it's a form of worshiping humans from the past. It's a look, this machine, it's gonna almost be like you, Joe Wong's in the room with you. It's like, yeah, but wouldn't we like the real thing even better? So this is what I mean by sometimes these technologies bring into relief how much better the human version is. And like I said, I'm not saying it'll always stay that way. I might be confused at some point. Is this really a human being? Is this the authentic thing? And if it's not, that might be real cause for concern. It could be that our humanity is being stripped away to such a degree that we should do something about it and not allow it to continue. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet, though.
perfect. Well, Ben, thank you very much for allowing us to do this interview. It's been a brilliant experience for me and for all of our viewers here. And yeah, thank you very much for giving us the time to do this.
Alex, this has been actually a really unique interview. I've never talked about these things in exactly this way. So I think your questions are really thoughtful, and thank you for inviting me and for the work you do and putting together interviews like this.